Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's conversation. I'm Dr. Angel Harris, Vice President and Chief Advancement Officer at United Way of Greater Houston, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Henri Fitzgerald, Senior Vice President, Managing Director of Endowment and Foundation National Practice Group at PNC. And we are here today to talk about something that every donor and every company cares about, and that's making a difference. And today we're going to be focused on the tax changes and what they mean for charitable giving this year and next year. Henri is an expert in this space and brings a wealth of knowledge from working with both individuals and corporations on financial strategy and philanthropy. So over the next few minutes, we'll unpack the key changes, how they will affect giving, what opportunities exist to continue to drive impact in our community. And so, Henri, if we can start, maybe you can assist us with the big picture here as we begin this conversation. Can you give us an overview of the most significant recent tax changes and what individuals and corporations should be aware of?
Absolutely. And thank you, Dr. Harris, for inviting me into this conversation. I'm very happy to be here and just as excited as you are. I would say that the first half of the year was full of uncertainty, to be quite honest here. We knew that there was a big tax proposal that was in play, didn't know what was going to be in it, and a lot of ideas were floated in the House and in the Senate. But we did get some clarity on July 4th of this year. And that's when the One Big Beautiful Bill Act became law. Now I'm going to refer to that as OB3 from now on, but that's one of the names that it's known by, and what that means is that there is a window that's been created this tax year, so in 2025, and through the end of the year, and you can make the most of the current tax rules. But what's on the horizon and what's changing? Let's start with individual donors. The first thing I would point out is that non-itemizers can now claim an above-the-line deduction. So that's $1,000 for single filers, and it's going to be $2,000 for married or joint filers. The other thing that's changing for individual donors, and this is really going to have an impact on larger gifts, itemizers can now, they're going to keep the 60% AGI or adjusted gross income limit for cash gifts. Historically, that had been 50%, so you can deduct up to 50% of your adjusted gross income. That amount was increased, but just temporarily through the end of 2025, and now that's been made permanent. The new twist for individual donors, and again, this is going to impact larger gifts because we know that for non-itemizers, which accounts for about 90% of taxpayers, that they're going to take advantage of the above the line deduction. But for larger gifts, there is a new charitable floor in giving. And so what that means is that that amount is going to be half of a percentage, but what it means is that you have to give at least a 0.5% of your adjusted gross income before any charitable income tax deduction can apply. Now, when we look at from a corporate donors, that again, this is something that's new in the tax rules. A 1% floor is in place, so it's 0.5% for individuals. It's going to be 1% for corporate donors, and the 10% ceiling has remained unchanged. That's been the law historically. That's going to be the same this year. So that's the maximum amount that can be deducted in any one given year. So you mentioned a little bit about what's the impact of that. I'd say that the bigger impact, and this is according to a study by EY, Ernst Young, is that this could be the corporate floor could impact charitable giving by a reduction in giving from corporations by, on the low end, 4.2 billion. The middle case is 4.5 billion, and on the upper end, the estimate it's going to be somewhere in the ballpark of 4.8 billion. So that's a significant drop that's anticipated as a result of the corporate tax rules, and that only assumes there's no creativity from corporations, and I don't think that's going to be the case.
I see. I understand. Which is interesting for support of United Way and nonprofit organizations. As you know, nonprofits, a lot of nonprofits depend on United Ways across the country and around the world. And we have donors that give an individual one-time gift in a year, and they also give payroll deductions. So I think what you've laid out gives us a good overview of how both categories of donors can continue to make a difference and then have the biggest impact possible. So how do these changes affect individuals who give to nonprofits?
Well, I'm going to say the first thing again, we touched on this, but the good news in the tax changes have been that, there is the new incentive for non-itemizers. And again, that is 90% of taxpayers. And they can deduct that $1,000 if they file a single and $2,000 if they file jointly. And again, that was not available before. There was a temporary increase that was a part of the Tax Jobs and Cuts Act, and further on into the pandemic and some of the special relief that was provided for nonprofits. That this now is going to, I believe, again, it's going to encourage small and mid-sized donors to give more. For itemizers, the AGI for public charity gifts, that's going to stay in place. It didn't drop back. And so again, for me, that is a win for larger gifts and larger dollar amounts. Again, the twist that's going to, again, this is, I've been kind of describing the good part of it, but the impact is going to happen on individuals. It's just going to be that floor that has never existed. And so now you have to give a certain amount before you can claim the tax incentives. Now, we know there's been a ton of studies that suggest that tax incentives are not the biggest driver behind charitable giving. But we're really going to have to wait and see. And so if I could add some numbers to this, I would say that for a donor whose adjusted gross income is 250,000, that means they have to make at least a $1,250 gift before they can claim a deduction. So again, that's going to be in one breath, that's going to increase some of the giving so they can qualify for some of those charitable income tax deductions. But again, it could be a disincentive for certain donors to give.
What do you think people should do right now to just make sure that they're making all of the right decisions before the end of the year?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that again, you have a window. And so when we talk about OB3, that's going to take effect by and large, starting with tax year 2026. So there's a window where you can take advantage of the current tax code as it's been written in the last several years. But I would say that there's certain things that are tried and true that are still very beneficial. And one of those is to give appreciated securities. Again, that helps to avoid capital gains, and it's going to boost the value of the deduction. Another strategy that we've been seeing is for donors that are 70 and a half or older to make a qualified charitable distribution from their IRA. And so this amount can be up to $108,000 per person each year. And so for a married couple, that could be, let's do this math here, $216,000 in relief by making a distribution directly from their IRA to a qualified charity. Another strategy would be to incorporate some of the split interest gifts. And so here I'm talking about charitable gift annuities or charitable remainder trust. Again, you get the relief from capital gains, but there's an income interest that could be a benefit to the donor or an annuitant that the donor names. And the other thing I would say that I imagine, and this is what happened the last time. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was enacted back in 2017. What you started to see was a lot of corporations pre-fund or bunch their giving. Same thing happened with donors when they gave to donor advised funds or things, strategies of that nature, is that they front loaded the gifts. And so essentially what they're doing is pre-funding multiple years of philanthropic giving in 1 year. And that allows them to clear any of the thresholds for deductions and also take advantage of carryover for future years.
Oh, yeah, that's a great strategy. And it would be great too if donors and nonprofit organizations are having those conversations so that the organization is aware as they're making their community investments over the next couple of years as well. I think we've had Donor DAF Day, which is another cool strategy that we recommend people consider when they're thinking about charitable giving. Do you mind just sharing a little bit about donor advised funds and how people can make best use of those as well?
Yes, I mean the biggest benefit of the donor advised fund is it allows for the donor to activate their charity immediately. So get the charitable deduction by making a gift now, and then making decisions on ultimate distributions over time. One of the benefits is that you can those funds are invested, and so if you make a gift now, it's invested. You're going to be able to do more in the future. It gives you the ability to build relationships with nonprofit organizations. I've seen some donor advised fund grantors test out nonprofits and make a smaller gift now, a grant now, and then as they see the results, they start to up that amount. And so, donor advised funds, it's you're going to hear a lot about that in the fourth quarter. I think that a lot of the news and media outlets, that's the only vehicle they know about. But it's a cool and very flexible way of giving, and it allows the donor to be very strategic in how they distribute those grants.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Well, I want to pivot a little towards corporations. I appreciate the explanation you just gave about how this might affect companies, but could we just go a little bit deeper on how the changes might influence corporate strategy or corporate philanthropy as they're making investments as well?
Absolutely, and again, I just remind everyone, it's the biggest change that's happening for corporations is the 1% floor. So they have to give a certain amount before they can get a charitable deduction, and historically they could give any amount up to 10% and claim a claim up to 10%. They can give a larger amount, but they could claim up to 10%. And then what they would do is anything that was over 10%, let's say it's 15%, and they have a 5% carryover, they can use that deduction in future years. And so they get one deduction this year and an ability to carry forward deductions into the future. But that 1% floor could prove to be a disincentive for corporations that have historically given less than the 10%. And to not receive any benefit for the first 1% of giving. And what we know is that typically over time, corporations typically give between 1 and 2% of their net income that's subject to taxation. And so that 1%, I mean, that floor could just disincentivize certain corporations to give. Again, I think that the creativity that I'm hearing right now is going to be the bunching strategy, but there's going to be other strategies. I know that corporations tend to have a lot of savvy in their giving, not always intentional, and that's something that we've been working with a lot of our corporate clients on, is just becoming more intentional and focused and strategic in their giving. I think that will continue, and I just don't imagine there will be a huge drop unless there is no creativity that's gonna take place, and I just don't. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that there's going to be some resilience and some creativity is going to help us to get around those falls.
Well, as we think about corporations, their philanthropic strategy, tying that to their corporate strategy, I'm proud to share that United Way has once again been recognized on the Chronicle of Philanthropy's America's Favorite Charities list, that ranks U.S. nonprofits based on their impact and the work they're doing in the community. And we ranked #1 this year. So I'm very excited about that for what we're able to do here in Houston and around the world. And so as you're working with your customers, what shifts are you seeing and noticing in the types of partnerships that they are prioritizing with their philanthropy?
Well, I'd say that communication. There's been a lot more collaboration, communication between companies and nonprofit organizations that they support. What I like to say about this, and this is the advice that I give to companies when I have the chance to have those conversations, is you have to get really clear about your corporate values. Listen to your employees and the things that they care about and the causes that they support. Engage with the community, and I know we hear a lot about corporate citizenship. This is an excellent opportunity to be a good, responsible corporate citizen. Now, with tax law changes coming, I think it's time to get really big. And so go all in, if you will. Nonprofits are serving communities. What's going to happen is, I mean, this is a part of the economy and some of the other things that are taken and some other cuts, is there's going to be a higher demand on nonprofits, and the resources aren't necessarily going to be there to meet that higher demand. And that's, again, going at the current pace. And so now's the time to go a little bit larger. I'd say go much larger, and make sure that the organizations that you are supporting, that they receive the resources to carry out the mission. So absolutely, tax incentives do matter. It's going to be a part of any conversation that corporations or individuals are having, and their corporations are also going to consider shareholder value. I mean, that's kind of their charter, is to maximize shareholder value. But we know that businesses thrive in strong communities. And this should be a part of the strategy as well, not just a tax incentive, but also how do we create thriving communities where corporations and communities can thrive and really see some level of success. I would say this also from and this again, put on my nonprofit hat, and I get asked this a lot, but it's um, make multi-year unrestricted grants. And that's something I hear quite a bit. It's, we want to we can't just have that one hit and then start a program that we can't sustain. And so the multi-year grants are going to play a big role in that. And I also say what that does for a donor or a grantee organization is it gives them flexibility. We don't know what the future holds, and just as it's hard to plan for corporations in an uncertain future, it's certainly hard for nonprofit organizations to plan for that uncertain future. And they're going to have to pivot at times. They're going to have to take on some big bold ideas to sustain the organization. And so we want to be partners in that journey.
I love that. I'm glad you bring that up about the multi-year strategies. At United Way, our mission, our focus, our call to the community is to help our neighbors land on their feet and stay there. And so we've seen that it does take about 3 years for someone who's working and beginning on that path to financial stability to be able to get there and be in a place where they can sustain it. So that multi-year investment really helps us make commitments to the families that we serve in our community and help ensure again that they land on their feet and that they stay there. Again, I just wanted to talk about any practical advice that you may have, whether it's an individual donor, company. If there was two things, as many things as you want, you're an expert in this space that you want our listeners to walk away from today having learned, what would that be?
But I'd say we just came off a political year, right? And so, or election year, I should say, not a political. Every year's a political year, but came off an election year, and so there was a lot of discussion about, democracy and voices, et cetera. And I'd say that philanthropy is a very powerful expression of democracy. Our communities speak through the nonprofits that we support, and in a world that can be a little bit loud and feel noisy with all the distractions that's going on, it's refreshing to know that you still have that voice. So my advice to donors, both individual donors and corporations, is to become an insider with the partners that you have, your nonprofit partners. Become an insider, understand the realities of what they're struggling with, what the opportunity sets are, listen closely to what the community needs are, and you have to invest in those organizations, and that is what amplifies that voice or that democracy that I was mentioning earlier. And I can tell you that transparency, I know that, I mean, I'm in a situation where I advise both the doers and the donors. And so I've seen that relationship. I know there's been a lot of discussion about trust-based philanthropy, and essentially what that is trusting that the organizations that are in the communities that are doing the work on the front line, that they have great ideas that are just underfunded. That's the only obstacle, is that they have the ideas, they just don't have the funding to bring it to life. And so again, become that insider, understand what the opportunity sets are, and give accordingly. Go all in, as I mentioned earlier.
Excellent. And I love that the doers and the donors, you're right, there's some excellent strategies that are out there. We're thrilled to be in the third year of our new strategy where we've launched navigators in the community to help take our families on a social services journey so that they can navigate their way through either with a navigator or later this month on their own, taking a self-directed journey inside of our integrated client journey tool. That was a concept that we just launched 3 years ago. And so you're right. There's a lot of great work out there that can be done. We work with a lot of partners across the greater Houston community that are doing really fantastic work. And we do appreciate every donor who supports the fantastic work that we're able to do across the community. I know I've peppered you with a lot of questions today. Is there anything that I didn't ask? Any additional information that you want to share?
Well, the only thing I would share, and again, this is maybe pie in the sky to some degree, but I can just say that philanthropy has proven to be very resilient. It tends to follow the market cycles to some degree, and it recovers a little bit slower than a market recovery would be. But it has always held up pretty strong, and we've seen that through some of the Giving USA data. And of course, there's some things happening beneath the numbers, and so there's been a shrinking of of the number of donors, but the gifts have been larger, and so you're still getting that same amount. What's starting to happen is it kind of favors larger nonprofits. It hasn't been as beneficial for some of the smaller ones, and so I do think that with the ability to deduct for non-itemizers, that's going to bring back the small and mid-sized donors that had kind of vanished from the pipeline. Again, I think the corporations are going to continue to be creative and keeping communities thriving as a business strategy, not just as a philanthropic strategy, but as a business strategy. And again, this is a pie in the sky a little bit, but there's several studies that show that high net worth individuals, they give based on their values, not just the tax breaks or tax incentives. That's icing on the cake, but work and the core work is done through keeping in alignment with the values that the individual or the family has. And so again, that's the hopeful message that I wanted to deliver. I know that some of the OB3 outcomes and projected impacts doesn't paint a very bright picture or a very sunny picture, but I believe in the core spirit of philanthropy in the US and amongst our citizenship.
Great. Well, I do hope that some of these opportunities give people the chance to hop into philanthropy and new ways to follow their passions and engage in organizations that are making an impact. And I love what you said about larger gifts, right? I always say people are giving more, we need more people giving. And so
Yeah.
hopefully this will give a chance for them to do so. Ari, thank you so much for sharing your insight, for helping us navigate what these tax changes really mean for our donors and corporate partners across our community. What I hope everyone takes away from this is while tax laws shift, the opportunity to make impact remains the same. Whether you're an individual donor or corporation, there are really smart strategies to maximize both your philanthropy and your generosity. And at United Way, we're here to be a partner on this journey, helping ensure that your giving continues to change lives, strengthen our community, and ensure our neighbors don't just land on their feet, but they stay there. So thank you, Henri. Thank you for being part of this discussion. We appreciate you and the partnership with PNC.
Thank you, Dr. Harris.